Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk about Lambda functions in Python. So Lambda functions are just a simple way of creating a one-line function in Python. And sometimes it's good to have a local function, or you just have a temporary function that you just want to use for a one-time thing. You could also make your code more condensed because it's just takes up very little space. And then sometimes people also call the Lambda function as anonymous function. So let's get started. Let's have a function name here that I'm going to call sum equals lambda, and you will pass in x1, x2 as your input arguments, and then what I'm going to do with the two numbers is add them together. And if I return it to what I call my sum here and pass in 1 and 2, if I put a debug point here, put a breakpoint, and then run it, you can see that my sum equals 3, right? So another way to call the lambda function is to just directly call it. So I could do lambda, I could say lambda x1, x2, and just pass in, again, x1 plus x2, that's what they're doing, and then the two input arguments, 1 and 2. So if I do that, you can see that it's also 3. Okay, so this is how you can call lambda function directly without having to store it as a name like I did here. Okay, so this actually makes more sense as an anonymous function because here it actually has no name, but it's up to your coding style to see what you want to do. Okay, so here I'm going to create a my list called 1, 2, 3, 4, and you could also just use it inside a filter function, for example, because the filter function by itself, you can see if I type filter, um, this is a function that you can use to pass in. There's two arguments. One argument is the function that you pass in, which could be a lambda function or just any normal function. And then the second input argument is going to be um, your if something that I could iterate over. So in my case, I'm using a list. So notice if I do filter, and again, if I pass in a lambda function here, so if I call this lambda x and then colon x percent sign 2, so I'm going to get all the even numbers and then pass in my list. You can see that it's a filter object. So a filter object, you can't really see what's happening, so I'm gonna cast it with a list, and you can see that I get a list of numbers 2 and 4. Okay, so this is one way that you can use a lambda function, is to pass it into a function that accepts a function as an input. So yeah, that kind of makes it easy to pass in, and that will be all for lambdas, and see you in the next one.